Welcome to another segment of the CPO Arena. I am your host and moderator, Jon Hansen. And before we get to today's presenter, which I'm sure you'll find innovative and certainly thought-provoking in the solution they're offering, I want to, first of all, introduce you to our panel, starting with Cadu Rosier. Cadu, welcome to the panel once again.
Hi, John. Thanks very much. Great to be on another episode. I'm Cadu Rosier, former CPO and corporate real estate executive with several global companies. I'm now the president of Collabora Consulting, focused on procurement transformation and sourcing excellence. And I'm excited to hear today's presentation. So
as
thanks,
always,
John.
Well, as always, we're going to look forward to your great insights. And I know you have some interesting questions, which is always adds value to the discussion. If I could remind you just to turn off your camera and we'll bring you back on during the Q&A. Next, I'd like to welcome Joseph Yakura. Joe, welcome. If you could give us about 30 seconds of who you are and a little bit of background.
Great, welcome. Thank you very much, John. I'm looking forward to today's presentation. My name is Joe Yakura. I've had the opportunity to be a Senior Vice President, Chief Procurement Officers for some large corporations in financial services, manufacturing, and hospitality industry. And most recently, I've created an organization called the International Association for Data Quality, Governance, and Analytics. And we're focusing on how the supply chain can better use data as they digitize their supply chains.
You know, so very exciting.
Looking forward.
Very exciting, interesting field. I read a paper that you co-authored with Rob Hanfield. I think that's going to be a key area, isn't it?
It is. I think that we're all challenged and we're all learning. So hopefully our association can help people along their progression here to learn more about data and how we use it in the supply chain.
Perfect.
And looking forward to today's presentation.
I'm looking forward to your input on this as well. If I could remind you to turn off the camera. And last but not least, I'd like to welcome Mike Cadu, founder of Procurement Foundry. Mike, if we can have you come up. I mean, I don't know if you need any introduction. I always say that because, you know, you're one of the ubiquitous forces in our industry, but nonetheless, I'm going to make you go through the perfunctory exercise.
Ubiquitous force in the industry. That's a lot. I don't know if I can live up to that. I'm Mike Cadu, former Chief Procurement Officer for Publicis Group. And then left and started a small community called Procurement Foundry, where we've created a collaboration community for the procurement and supply chain industry. Most of the folks probably know who it is now.
Okay. Well, very exciting, and I know the Foundry is making a difference. You've grown rapidly over the last little while into the thousands now, and it seems like you just started not that long ago. So obviously, we see big, great things ahead for your organization there.
Yeah, we're about 5,000 people in 115 countries now, and we just started a scholarship fund, and we've got conferences coming up and things like that. So it's free. Our community is free to all the members. You just got to pass the test and actually be a practitioner. And unfortunately, you can't be on the sell side and be in our community. So,
well, there you go. Maintaining the integrity of the community. Thank you for being here, Mike. If I could ask you to turn off your camera. Now, before I bring our presenter today, Ian Campbell McKenna from Sourcing Solve, I want to give you a little bit of an idea as to the format of the program if you're joining us for the first time. During the CPO Arena session, we're going to have the presenter, the provider, share with you a little bit about the organization, either by way of video or PowerPoint. I think today it's going to be by video. And then after that 5-minute session, we'll move to the next segment. They will actually demonstrate a key element of their solution or a proponent that stands out. And then we will move to our panel, who will have an opportunity to ask them questions about what they've just seen. And finally, closing the last 5 minutes is our beefs and bouquets. And let me tell you, the bouquets obviously are providing the positive feedback in terms of what has been seen. The beefs, not complaints so much as useful critiquing and input. You know, it often requires more information. And that's the whole idea of this panel, is to provide you as a CPO, as a procurement professional, with a lens into emerging technology solutions, and the questions that you would ask, our panel will be able to ask and provide you with insight. So let's take it, and let's not, without any delay, keep Ian Campbell McKenna from joining us. And Ian, I'm going to, of course, create the sharing screen where you can take over and share your story. I believe you got a video to start with us, correct?
Yes,
There
that
you
is
go.
correct. Hi, John. Hi, everyone. Pleasure to meet you, and thanks very much for letting me on the show. So, yes, I do have a video with me. Would you like a little bit of background about myself, or would you like me just go straight to video?
Well, let's go to the video. If you
Yeah.
have one, that seems to work well.
Bear with me, and I shall share my screen with you now.
The procurement industry is unique, specialised and constantly changing. Yet when we assess our individuals and teams, we can only use generic measures, which are at best mildly interesting, and at worst, irrelevant. With the constant reinvention of a function that's often misunderstood, how can CPOs understand the capabilities of their people, their teams, their function? So how do I measure my procurement teams against meaningful procurement criteria that actually matter to me? Let's show you. Each individual takes the questionnaire. Instead of a typical scoring mechanism of to what extent or how often, our questionnaire lists specific elements of procurement activities, and individuals are asked to rank them in order of those where they're most strong to least strong. This way, no one can simply take the middle ground, as so often happens on assessments, and they're forced to choose. Now let's look at the results. The profile opens with a graph of the individual scores against the 5 main elements of procurement. This person's procurement skill set. Where do their strengths lie? Learn about the 5 elements in more detail. Click on the See More box for a fuller description, including the upsides and downsides of being strong in each element. And it has all this information for all 5 main elements. The 5 main elements of procurement are comprised of 20 sub-elements, and next we drill into those to provide a more granular, meaningful picture. This section shows my 5 top strengths. If we click on one, we can see it explains the strength in greater detail and shows in very practical terms how can I better play to my natural strengths. We can see it does the same for all 5 top strengths. Next, it shows the 5 main areas for development. Of the 20 sub-elements of procurement, which are the most challenging for this person? By clicking here, it provides a more in-depth analysis, plus some practical, specific ways to develop. From this procurement profile, each individual gains an insight into their strengths and how they can better bring those to bear in work, and about how they might develop their weaker attributes. Now let's take a look at data for a whole team. If we click the Our Procurement Team tab to the left, it opens up the group profile. Once again, the profile opens with a graph showing how the whole group scored against the 5 major elements. It then poses some questions to the CPO or manager or to the group itself. Who are the top scorers in the group against each of the 5 major elements? Who is your strongest relationship builder? This graph shows the whole group, all of their scores against all 20 sub-elements. It is fully interactive. We can see the group average, and we can compare individuals or clusters of individuals against the average, or remove the average and compare 2 or more individuals. There's so much data here to help decide who could support whom, highlight gaps, show where the areas of development are, and how well the team is built to deliver on your current procurement challenges. It can also help in recruitment by mapping the team and assessing candidates to see best fit for your group. This system is comprehensive. It helps individuals better play to their strengths or build on their areas for development. And most importantly of all, it is all specifically procurement focused.
All right. Well, that was an interesting video. Why don't we move to the next phase? Ian, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's go into a demonstration.
Sure. My name is Ian Campbell McKenna. Some of you may have heard of me from Procurement in 5 Minutes. I'm also the Managing Director of Sourcing Solved. I've worked in procurement myself and then moved into more talent advisory, executive search. And recently we built the Procurement Performance Map, or as we call it in the US, the Procurement Analyser. And really that was, we've kind of learned and understood what are the important elements for procurement to be able to deliver, but also to build a better impression of themselves internally across the whole business. And what we seen was a gap in the marketplace, that there were so many tools out there that, it can help us from, P2P side, who can help us with sourcing, who can also help us with the hard skill side. So looking at, where are the gaps from a hard skills perspective. But there was nothing out there specifically for procurement that helped us measure the behavioural traits of our team. And as we all know, yes, hard skills are incredibly important. However, they can be taught. What's incredibly important for our business and our function is to understand what makes a successful function, how can we replicate it, or how can we invest our budgets for training properly. And the only way I'm being able to do that is to understand the team. Now, you can take a half hour, an hour having a coffee, but will we really get to understand the team in that way? So we came up with an idea and a concept. We partnered with a psychologist and a mathematician, and we went out and we built the tool. And I'm pleased to say it's finished and we have people using it as we speak.
All right. Now, how about a demonstration? Can you provide that? I know it was covered over in the video, but maybe provide the demonstration. And afterwards, we'll move to the panel Q&A.
Yeah, bear with me 2 seconds. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So let me talk you through the whole concept. So as you can see, I've got 2 screens here. So if you see me moving to the side, I promise you I'm not going mad. So as you can see on the left-hand side, you can see statements, and they're not questions. And the reason they're not questions is we can't take the middle ground here. And also, when we think from a cognitive perspective, we look at things differently. So when we're answering the question, there needs to be a middle ground. This way, people have to move these boxes in order and rank themselves. And where do I think I'm strongest? And where do I think I'm least strong? And as you can see, this is all very procurement focused. So I move these across like so. And as you can see, I'm doing this randomly. However, if I decided to move these across, and then I decided, well, maybe I actually disagree, that should be here, or that should be there. You can move these around. Now, in each, you have a block, which is here. And in each block, you have 10 statements. So there's 60 all in all. And it takes an average of 10 to 15 minutes to complete that. Now, what happens when you complete the assessment? This is what you receive. So I have a report here. So this is myself. Now, what are my strengths? As you can see, I've got a nice map here from strategy. So strategic focus, relationship focus, power, functional, and change and improvement. And these are the core areas that we really believe are important for procurement to deliver, having strategic relationships with your stakeholders, having, power, which is very interesting. So maybe I've got too much power and I can't relinquish that power to someone else, or legal power. Maybe I'm slightly apprehensive when it comes to contracts, and change and improvement. When you're going through change, it's about building those relationships. It's about changing your process, realigning your strategy for the overall business strategy. So all of these elements are incredibly important for procurement. So what happens on the left-hand side is, as I complete the assessment, I can see that I'm scored from a percentage perspective. So I can see more. This is what I'm really good at, but this is something I need to be really mindful of. And that goes through from power, strategic, change and improvement, and functional. And then we can see the subsections. As you can see, internal power comes under power on the right-hand side. So internal power, I can see, how do I play to my strengths? The same with external relationships, my procurement colleagues, external power, internal, and then we call this development points, because there are assessments out there, but they say negatives and positives, and we don't see this as a negative. We see it as an area that we have to develop. And remember, we want everybody to have a great experience here, not just the CPO, but also the people who are doing the assessment themselves, to take something away that's valuable and useful for them. So I can say, productivity, it's an area I need to improve on. I can see more. I can see process. I can see more, analytical and productive. And then I get, this is UK, but we have US data as well. I can see where am I in relation to other people in my space. So in the procurement space, where am I? How do I benchmark against the average? Now, this is what's really powerful, is from a CPO perspective, I can get a helicopter view of the behavioral traits in my team, and I can see where are the areas that I need to, drill down. So as I can see these two areas here, which are very much color coordinated on the right hand side. I can see who are my top scorers. So who are my strategic people in my team? Who are the top relationship, top change, top functional, and top power? And then I get a mathematical average of the whole team. Now, what's important to note is we can drill this down into individual job functions. So I could do an assessment for my category managers, for my buyers, and so on and so forth. And as you can see below, here are all the subsections. Here is your average, and I can click on each individual person, and I can see where are they in relation to the average. I can also see where are the natural curves in my team. So as the video quite rightly said, if I'm recruiting people, I don't want to be hiring people exactly a carbon copy of my existing team. I want to be looking at people who can fill those strategic gaps in my team. I can also say, maybe I do an assessment for my buyers, and I look at this data and then I benchmark that against the data from my category managers, and I can say, well, hang on a minute, I've got some really amazing talent here that, quite frankly, because of my workload and my time periods and all the meetings that I'm getting called into, I wasn't aware. Shouldn't we really be bringing this really talented buyer and fast tracking them into a category management role? It also helps me understand, where do I invest my budgets? So with a training budget, I can do skills gap analysis and see where the gaps are in my team from a skills perspective. But how do I understand my team from a behavioral perspective? And that's really challenging. So when you use this tool, I can understand, where are the strategic gaps in my team? Where do I invest my budgets? Maybe I have to switch people's roles. So maybe I've got a very strategic person doing an analytical position. Why are we doing that? So we should switch them around. And also, do I have the right people in the right seats on the right bus going in the right destination? So, and finally, I can also do it from a singular basis. So if I take all these out, like so, you can see an individual, or I can take the average benchmark out and I can just benchmark the team as a cluster or individually, like so. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the demonstration, and I'm certainly open to questions.
All right. Oh. Thank you, Ian. That was an interesting presentation. First of all, let's start off with Cadu. I'd like to, and leave your camera on if you could, Ian. Cadu, I'd like to invite you to ask questions on what you've seen and take it from there.
Okay, thanks, John, and thanks, Ian. I actually have two questions. The first one is, so first let me say, I think it's an interesting tool, and thanks for letting us on the panel take it, which was a really interesting exercise. Do you offer services that you provide to clients that goes along with the tool? so that you can give them a way to help put the findings into context, and a way to help them develop perhaps some meaningful strategies out of the data. So that's question number one. And then question number two, because I know this is a hot topic for a lot of people. How do you handle when a potential client has questions about data privacy, or how the tool works within the construct of GDPR?
Okay, so I'll take the first question, and the answer is yes, we do provide consultancy services, because I think when you're designing such a tool, first of all, you have to have a kind of basis, like a ground foundation to build on, because as you know, every procurement function is very different. Some report to CFO, some report to CEO, and I spoke to someone the other day in a CPO who reported into corporate communications. Don't ask me why, but that is the reality here. So yes, we provide consultancy services, and it's really about working with the CPO, understanding what their strategy is, and then helping them align that particular team with the overall objectives. So yeah, the short and sweet of it is yes, we do provide consultancy services as an additional feature. Secondly, with regards to data privacy, we're really hot on that topic. GDPR, as you know, before we exited the EU, it still pains me to say that, we had to, we went through the process of GDPR. So our data is securely backed up in Amazon Glacier. We have a data policy that we're more than happy in sharing with people. Everyone's read it. There's been no problems or any issues whatsoever. And as far as people doing the assessment, when we're doing like benchmarks, and when people see the average benchmark of the UK or the US, all of the data becomes anonymized, so it just becomes numerical and statistical. So there's no company name shared or anything like that. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you. Great questions, by the way, Candace. So much appreciated as always. Next, I'd like to ask Joe to ask his questions and see what areas you want to focus on.
Great. Well, Ian, thank you very much for the presentation. It was very interesting.
Pleasure, Joe.
My question is, I could see this being used as a tool to measure an organization and the people within a company. I guess my question is how are you adjusting, or does it adjust? Obviously, the educational and technical capabilities of people in the procurement and supply chain function vary by industry. So someone in finance will have to have a different set of skill sets than somebody maybe, let's say, in manufacturing or agriculture or hospitality industry. So when you say you can benchmark, can you explain to me a little bit more about how that benchmarking takes place?
Sure. So, I mean, every company, first of all, every company is different. So when I say benchmark, you can benchmark, the individual will see a benchmark of procurement professionals in their country, for example. But internally, I always say, don't use a benchmark for say, because every company is very different. So when I use the terminology benchmark, what I mean is you get the mathematical calculation of the average of the team, and you can benchmark each individual based on the mathematical average of the team. So you can see whether your team are well balanced or not. Because if you look at the graph, if everybody's at the very high end for most areas, and then some areas are quite low, you don't want to be, for example, hiring someone who's going to be identical to your existing team, because then you're going to double your problem or quadruple your problem. So when I say benchmark, what I mean is benchmarking to make sure that you've got a well oiled machine where people are complementing one another, and also you're looking at what they're good at, for example, from our openness to change or managing complexity, and benchmarking that against their actual position and saying, well, they're in a change management role, but they're not open to change. So
right.
Is that, and you can also benchmark it if you're doing, for example, if you've done skills gap analysis, and you can look at the data you've done from the behavioral side and your skills gap analysis, and you can understand why. So if somebody scored low on, for example, stakeholder management, you can see from the behavioral data and you can understand why. So it just helps you understand, why is this person like this? How can I help them improve? And how can I invest in this individual to either move to another role, or how do I help them improve in an existing one? That's
Yeah.
where I'm going with the benchmarking side.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I have another question. I two, just like Candace. Second one is, do you see your current users using this more as a tool to assess their own internal existing organization, or do you see it used as a way of screening out potential employees?
It's a very good question, and thanks for that, Joel. It's multifaceted, so it's not a clear-cut answer. We have people who look at it from a recruitment standpoint, but what they do is, first of all, they assess their existing team, understand where the strategic gaps are. Then they'll write a specification very specific, because they know where the highs and the learning curves of the team are, to advertise. And then when they get applicants that they want to shortlist, they use the tool to make sure that they are complementing the existing team, so they are addressing the highs and the lows.
Okay.
And from a CPO perspective, they are looking at it from a discovery perspective. So you may have a new CPO or a new team, or you're going through change, and you really want to understand, who did take the change journey with me? Who do I manage the analytical side? Who loves that? Because I think in procurement, there is a place for everyone. We just need to make sure they're on the right seats, on the right bus, going the right destination.
Great. Well, thank you very much.
Pleasure, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. That was great. And finally, and I always say this last but not least, Mike Cadu. Questions for Ian about the presentation and what you saw.
Hey, Ian, great to see you.
Hi.
We know each other, actually. I think what you've built is great. Thank you for the presentation.
Pleasure.
I think that insight into the soft skills side of our teams, and being able to, I know as an acting CPO, one of the things I always was trying to do was fill the gaps, right? And if this helps me to visualize and fill the gaps, that's great. There's often times when we don't have enough time as senior operators to actually do this. So it sounds like the fact that you're actually offering services to do this is great as well. Question for me is, it looks like in most of your presentation was around analyzing your existing organization. I'm interested in, at number one, what are you seeing for success so far with the early adopters of this product? And secondly, are people starting to look at it from a recruiting perspective, and are they asking their inbound recruits to fulfill this question as well, so they're getting a synopsis of the inbound recruits as well?
So let's start with the tool itself. So what I'm seeing is people are using the tool for, as I said, it's sort of multifaceted. So I couldn't say that there's one specific way that you're using the tool, because people are see the quality of the tool in different ways, because they're at different maturity levels within the procurement team. What I'm saying is CPOs, first of all, trying to understand, we're dealing with a large betting company, and they want to understand, what does my whole team look like? Because there's a lot of behavioral assessments out there, and they're pretty big documents. They're like, some are like 50 pages. How do I dissect all that information and make it relevant? Because you wouldn't take a IT developer and put them into procurement. So if you do these assessments, what's relevant and what isn't? So I think CPOs are really starting to see the value of data, and they're understanding that hard skills can be taught, and behavioral skills, are very much entrenched in who we are as an individual. So they just want to align the team to understand, am I playing to my team's strengths? They're also trying to understand, when you get up, it very rarely happens, but when procurement does get a training budget, where do you invest it? Because you pull one of your team members to the side and you give an hour's conversation, and they're going through major contract negotiations, they are on board new suppliers, or maybe got issues with the new P2P that they've implemented. Their head's not in the game. So that 1 hour conversation, do they have the capacity and the bandwidth to give you a realistic answer on where they would like to learn, what they would like to learn, and where you should invest your training budget in that specific individual? And the answer is probably not. That hour's conversation is really difficult to really kind of get out of an individual. What can I help you improve in? So it's understanding the team's strengths. It's new CPOs who can use it, existing CPOs, and also from an academy perspective, if you're putting people through training and you do a benchmark of where they are from a behavioural perspective at that point in time, and then once it goes through training, you can do another benchmark and see if there's been any strategic changes in their thought processes and how they see the procurement function moving forward. And the recruitment side, it's very easy. When we understand the team, then we know what we're looking for. But we have got a habit of well, Joe was a great person, let's find a carbon copy of Joe. But our business changes, our processes change, the market changes, suppliers changes, COVID has happened, so how we do procurement has changed. So we can't rely on old data. We need to think about new ways and more proactive ways and more strategic ways of getting the right people into the business.
Do you see, follow-up question, do you see organizations using this obviously for their internal teams, but do you see them long-term starting to deploy this as kind of a prerequisite questionnaire to fill out as a recruit is coming in the door to show where they map against a team? So you could take, these are my potential recruits. This is the gaps that I have. If I hire these people, they lay over onto my map and it looks really nice. Like, do you see people requiring people in the future? Do you see chief procurement officers requiring people in the future to take your assessment as part of their hiring practice?
I think it would be a very useful way of doing it, because as you know and I know and everybody knows that you could receive 2 CVs and they just look amazing.
Yeah.
But it's only words on a piece of paper. It means nothing. I spoke to a CPO a week ago, and he said, Ian, I was looking for my number 2. And the individual looked amazing on paper, had all the relevant experience. And when I met the individual, they had all the right skills, but from a strategic perspective and their ability to build relationships with quite challenging stakeholders, there was just nothing there. And he said that he would get eaten up and start out. So, they need a particular type of individual, and there's no way of evaluating that on a CV. So I think it would be an incredibly valuable tool to anyone that's going out into the marketplace.
John, do I have time for one more question or no?
Absolutely.
Great. So we on the CPO arena have looked at other products that are attempting to help senior leadership manage their teams as well. Not as soft skilled and as your product is as far as evaluating skills assessment and things like that. So one of the products that we recently reviewed, or the solution that we recently reviewed, showed all the team members, and it got really analytical. This is this person, this is their category, this is how much they've saved, dates on negotiation, how fast they get through the process, how much spend on the management they have, all of those wonderful analytical things that are the hard and crunchy bits, and you've got the nice soft chewy bits. Do you see some point in time where you start to marry those together and say, hey, listen, these are the traits of a person who tends to have the highest negotiation strategy and recovery opportunities, as far as like is there a marriage there at some point in the future?
I think your assessment does work incredibly well with something that does look at the hard skill side of things.
Yep.
So we have done a little bit of work with another skills gap analysis software company
Yep.
who have a tool that helps organizations understand where the hard skills, what
Yeah.
are the hard skills in my team, and how do they evaluate to, you know, the CPO's perspective versus their perspective. So it's finding out how good they are at delivery, but then that doesn't chew the fat as far as the soft skill side of things. So they marry up, you know,
Very
beautifully.
well. Yeah.
So the answer to your question is yes, we are in that kind of thought process of, you know, partnering with a particular software company.
Great.
But we haven't married up the two tools as of yet.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Great question. You know, I'm going to date myself here. It reminds me of that old TV show, The $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman. We have the technology to build the perfect procurement professional. Sorry for that digression there. Anyway, great questions. Let's start now with the beefs and bouquets. And I'm going to return to you, Kanda, to provide your assessment of what you've seen today.
Okay. And John, you want me to do both the bouquets and the beefs together? Or are we doing all one and then all the other?
Actually, let's do them both together.
Okay. Okay, great. Thanks. So let me start with the bouquets. So Ian, I really like the tool. You know, I think there's a lot of uniqueness. I thought it was very easy to use. So, you know, in terms of whether you're asking an applicant or whether you're asking, you know, an employee, a current employee to take it, I think it's easy. It's not off-putting in any way, and I think those are all really good things. So it's easy to use, and I think that the insights from it, the fact that they're tailored to procurement, sourcing, supply chain, is really critical, and it's a really great aspect. You know, I think as a hiring manager and also as an applicant, I've taken, you know, Myers-Briggs and Emergenetics and a whole bunch of other similar tests, and they're all generic. And because they're not tailor-made for procurement, I think the value of those is so much less, and more importantly, the value of your tool becomes much greater because it's tailored for the industry and kind of the mindset of somebody who's in procurement. So I think those are all really great things. My beef, and I don't think it's a beef, it's just an observation, kind of goes back to the question that I had. It's more of, I guess, an observation of a potential concern. If a client, if a CPO, an organization were to take the data from the results out of context of sort of understanding, you know, the services that you talked about and how they wrap around. The concern that I have is that the data without the context of the organization, the culture of the organization, the role the individual's in, we'll call it the sophistication or the maturity level of the individual and the organization as a whole. I think without those kinds of contexts, the data could be misconstrued and lead people to conclusions about an individual or a team that might not be as accurate. So I think my sort of final comment would be, I think it's really important as you take this into prospects and to the market, that it's clear that it's a tool, it's not the answer. And to having that wraparound of your services, I think will be critical for the value of the tool to really be accentuated to your users. So those are my comments. But all in all, I think it's a really interesting solution.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kanda. Now let's bring Joe in to provide his beefs and bouquet.
Sure. Well, Ian, thank you very much for your time. I think it's a very interesting product. I think it's something that's definitely needed in our space to have an application focused on the supply chain. Kind of go a little bit though along with Kanda is the fact that, as we all know, the needs and the profiles of the people we need vary by industry. And I'm not sure that if any of this could be customized or not. I think, a lot of the assessment from what I understand of the tool right now is it's a lot about aptitude. I'd like to see a little bit more along what I think Mike was talking to earlier about increasing or maybe combining some abilities, assessment of people's skills. I think that's very important. We all know that, either you have this, like you're saying, the gentleman you talked to the other day, on paper, the person had the skills, but probably didn't have the right aptitude or some other traits. So I think in order to be more beneficial, if we can capture some of the aptitude of the people taking the test, their understanding, their personality, things of that nature, along with the skills of some level of assessment, I think that would be extremely powerful. So that would be my comment as you look to develop the tool, see how that might be able to be integrated in some way. So those are my comments.
Thank you.
As always, insightful, Joe. Thank you. And finally, Mike, care to weigh in with any thoughts on the positives and areas that perhaps, and again, I hate to use the word beef, but maybe up to critiquing.
Yeah, I'll start with the beefs first because I like to deliver, the thick stuff before the sprinkles on the donut. I think for me as a former practitioner, I like this a lot as a service. I like this a lot as a team assessment service that you provide to me, and that you could come in and I know that you said you're doing some of that as well. I see this as hey, let me come in as part of your annual budgeting and forecasting and staffing and training program assessment. I start those things in September. I want to bring you in. I want you to do all the dirty work for me. I don't know that I'm qualified to actually, I love it. I think I love the visualization. I don't know that I'm qualified to be somebody who can interpret the results. I'm just a guy who grinds contracts and got really good at it and got escalated up to the chief procurement officer seat, right? So I think that that's probably something that, rather than being a tool that I'm using as a CPO, I'm interested in buying a service from you and you're leveraging your tool to give me your expertise in that space. And that's probably my biggest beef. Although I'm sure that there are some people who would love to be hands-on and psychoanalyze their teams. I'm sure there are. Bouquet, this is long overdue in our business. Absolutely no question about it. Congratulations on building something that's actually unique to our industry. As much as it can be on first rev, and I understand this is 1.0. I'm sure it'll evolve over time. I see it as something that, as long as it's priced accordingly, I see it that every organization should be using this at least for their internal assessments, because I think there is that marriage of the skills and the deliverables along with where they are positioned as a team, right? I am all about diversity of team when it comes to their capabilities, their abilities, and all of that other activity. I love the idea that you're thinking about that long term. So I think that there's definitely places where you can bring in and enhance the data. And I think that you'll get there in 2 and 3.0. And I also love the idea of using this both for internal evaluation and onboarding of new recruits. I think that that's a huge opportunity for you in the evolution of your process, and I know that that's kind of part of what some of what you do now. So definitely see that as a bouquet as well. I think that more and more people should be using this product right away to evaluate inbound, because like you said, there are thousands and thousands of candidates that look fantastic on paper, and you don't see it until you actually. So a lot of times people don't get there until they actually bring people in, and then they realize, like the example that you gave, this person's going to get chewed up and spit out by tough stakeholders, and we might have been able to catch that in an evaluation of this strategy on the inbound. So super excited to see where you go with that.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much, Mike. That's great. Ian, any last final statements you want to make or add based upon what you've heard in the final minute?
Yeah, I appreciate where Canda's coming from, where Joe's coming from. I think a lot of organizations have already sort of had their existing teams evaluated from a skills perspective. But as Mike quite rightly said, we've left out the behavioral side of things. So this is where I think it could be very useful.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the CPO arena or entering the CPO arena. And I want to remind everybody that this segment has been recorded. It'll be made available in its entirety. I'd also want to remind you that following this segment over the next week or two, we will be releasing a synopsis with the panel's comments and views and a little bit more information on the Sourcing Solve solution. Until then, and until the next time, are you ready to enter the arena? I hope so. Take care. Bye for now.